Natasha Vita-More, PhD in life extension, looking at expansion through advances in technology, especially artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and nanorobotics. University professor. You know, it's interesting, even though I have spanned many domains in my career over time, each domain has benefited the previous one and vice versa. So I did start out in the arts, and I was a filmmaker, videographer, performer, and that gave me the opportunity to learn about the aesthetics and the sensibility that the broad range of arts has, including storytelling. And I think today storytelling is one of the most beneficial art forms there is. While visual arts is now digitized and it's, you know, moving images and whatnot, but it's the words put together that create the story that is so needed today. From the arts, early on in my career, I started writing poetry and not quite full stories, but most of the videos I made, I started and also wrote the scripts for. So it's all about humanity and a bit of psychology and philosophy intertwined. Then I went into the technologies and went to as many conferences as I possibly could on everything I didn't know, so I would at least have a grasp of the terminologies used. And that helped form my sensibility about what I wanted to do in looking at the future. As a scientist, I have had a scientific breakthrough, which was unexpected for me, but I'm the type of person that looks for gaps, and then I'll learn what I need to learn in order to fill that gap. So one of the gaps that I recognized is the growing disease of dementia. And I wanted to check long-term memory and see if I could do a scientific experiment with vitrification and long-term memory, and I succeeded with that. But it all fits together in a way on the broader picture. The umbrella for this transdisciplinarity is certainly from a philosophical scope, something that I think is very much needed today. What is interesting is when I was a child, 11 years old, I had a tumor that was growing very rapidly. My surgeon in Chicago was notably one of the most affluent surgeons in the world on this particular type of tumor. And I had it removed. But while I was at the doctor's office in Chicago, I saw many different people with different alternative body formations, let's say. And it was before prosthetics got to a point where it is today that is very sophisticated with haptic systems and narrow AI and seamless, beautiful design. I mean, it's almost like sculpture. But back then, prosthetics was just at a beginning stage. Luckily, I did not need a prosthetic. I was young enough where my bone structure grew back. But what I saw early on in life was some of the horrendous diseases and injuries that can affect someone's body. Later, many, many years later, as a teenager, I was volunteering for the Home for Incurables in Memphis, Tennessee. And what I would do with my sorority would be to take food and gifts and projects and, you know, delightful things to this home. Today, this would not be in existence. There would be no such thing as a home for incurable. But back then in the 1960s, there was a home for incurables. And so I saw people with the most extraordinary othernesses with their bodies that would freak out most people, most of the mainstream. But at that time, it was shocking, to be sure. Fast forward to the late 20th century. I remember living in Santa Monica in Venice, California, and I would take long walks in Palisade Park. And I remember I was with a very dear friend of mine, F.M. Sfondiari, who was notably a brilliant mind, and we would talk about the fragility of the human body And there was one woman walking with, not a stroller, but a walking chart. She had had maybe paralysis or polio, or I'm not sure what she had. But I remember thinking, why are our bodies so frail and so vulnerable? And why don't we have alternative bodies? For example, Stephen Hawking, as brilliant as he was, had to use a computer to communicate. Why couldn't he have had a different body? So it made me start thinking about alternative bodies. And I designed Primo Posthuman in 1996 as maybe a prototype for an alternative body if and when a person would need an alternative body. And largely it was designed to, like a shell, and then you could select, like fashion, you could select what color, shape, tone, etc. But the whole point of Primo Posthuman was looking at the future of where we would have alternative bodies to a strict biological body. And I think that advances in prosthetic has certainly lent itself in that direction. One of the biggest challenges in designing the architecture for a particular synthesis between the bio body and maybe a technological body, whether it's through AI, different systems, or nanotechnology, et cetera, is compatibility. I don't use the term alignment because I think it's misused in the ethical sphere, especially with the onslaught of existential risk and that pervading creativity and freedom of imagination to envision a future. I think it's really done some detrimental things to that scope. But one of the most important things is that there's a compatibility and a symbiotic relationship, much like the mitochondria and the human body. We work together. And I think that is a really exceptional, not maybe metaphor to use when trying to explain technology in the body as far as enhancement or augmentation. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe we need it to evolve, to be healthier, more humane society, and to move beyond so many of the tremendous and horrific diseases that we face today in our biological system. So that symbiotic relationship as well as compatibility, that nothing really invasively detracts from the beauty of biology, but adds to it. I will define it as I wrote it in the manifesto in 1983. Transhumanism is a worldview. It stems from a philosophical outlook that is historically associated with the Renaissance and looking at the Enlightenment, when there was a period in our history where a sense of trying to get at what is existence? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be alive? How does reason fit into that, rather than a mythic tales and lore that had been very strong historically in various religions around the world? Not to dismiss that, but to build another area of scholarly questioning and exploration. That the sense of reason is very important. You don't always have to be a rational person to be sure, but trying to understand the crux of matters in strategic thinking and developing scenarios and looking creatively at the future. So I think the Enlightenment was a brilliant time in history as far as the Renaissance, maybe not to women, but largely a brilliant time in the growth of knowledge for our human history. The transhumanism is related to that. However, it separates from it in very obvious ways. Humanism was very much the philosophy of that time during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. But transhumanism takes it further, certainly. Humanism was secular, where religion was very enforced at that time. And so I think there's a lot to, a beautiful sentiment that ought to be paid to and respectfully deferred to with humanism, but it stopped there. Human was to remain human, and human was to have certain limits put on it. Transhumanism alternatively looks at the transformation of knowledge, the transformation of what an enlightenment could be as far as gaining wisdom, becoming a more humane humanity, as an example. And the core fundamental goal of transhumanism is changing the human condition. And the next question would be from that, well, what do you mean by the human condition? What I mean by the human condition is there are positive and negative aspects of the human condition, to be sure, but it's the negative aspects of the human condition that transhumanism looks at changing, such as limited lifespan, disease, the acceptance of disease, the voluntary acceptance of disease and death, the voluntary acceptance of inequalities, the voluntary acceptance of hierarchies in society, and that there are certain people who are gifted or allotted titles and others who can never have them. These are all certain societal constructs that have been placed on humanity, and it goes across societies and tribes throughout the world. But it's something that it seems to be very much sequestered within the human condition that I think we need to get beyond. Within transhumanism, I think that it's gotten to a point where it has become so known in the world, maybe not so much in the mainstream per se, but certainly in academics and scholarly work, and certainly associated with technological acceleration, for example, artificial intelligence and AGI, machine learning, as well as singularity and genetic engineering and all the things, let's say that if we could put them together, all the things that tends to frighten society at large, the areas of scientific development and technological prowess that is altering the norm of society or normalcy, and that is frightening to a lot of people because basically we don't like change. We like to have a consistency or continuity in our lives, and we don't like the disruptive or unintended consequences. But sometimes the disruptions and unintended consequences are so darn beneficial that after the shock comes from them, we go, wow, we made it through that, and that's great. So this ties into a very core aspect of transhumanism, which is cognitive plasticity, ability to adapt and change, to evolve. And our species has evolved over time since the earliest days of the Australopithecus to where we are today. And that took a long period of time and slow evolution. However, we're seeing it speed up, and that's the scary thing, that we're talking about human enhancement, human augmentation. The term cyborg is very well known, certainly in Hollywood films and written about in numerous stories, and it's a false term. It's a cyborg is a machine human, but it doesn't have identity, it doesn't have free will. Well, we don't know if we do, but it doesn't have consciousness or something that we aspire for wisdom. Whereas the transhuman is the better term to use, and it's much more affluent and amenable to where we're headed, that we can transform who we are to become the person or the people that we would want to be in the future. That if we want to live longer and enjoy and flourish in life, we certainly want to do that, or most of us at least would like to do that with a tremendous respect for life and love and joy in life, as well as peace of mind. And we are at a point where we can envision a possible future, or possible futures, that we can choose between and help build. And that is tremendously exciting to me, and that's part of the transhumanist perspective as well. One project that I'm working on in light of this is because transhumanism has gotten a fair amount of bad press over the past few decades. Much of that bad press has been developed from misinterpretation, misinformation, and disinformation. And largely, people make money off of fear. you put out a headline or splash page in a magazine or newspaper or on TV or even in a tweet that alarms the public and they get afraid. And so then the straw man there is transhumanism. So transhumanism has been blamed for a lot of the problems or foreseeable risks, and that is simply something that needs to be corrected, and that is my current project that I'm working on now. So you ask, how does my broad transdisciplinary background help me? It helps me because if I'm to create messages that will be beneficial and educational to people, I need to do it with objectivity and creativity rather than my personal view or my ideology or my own fears and complaints, but make it something that offers a tidbit of potentiality or possibilities. And the secondary aim of that is there's so many myths that surround us that are constantly being referred to, like the Prometheus myths or Icarus or Pandora's box, or, don't fly too high, don't wish to, don't say anything too good because you'll be cast down, something bad's going to happen. We need better myths. We need myths that will, lore and stories that will help inspire people to be better people, to make choices that are beneficial to us. And here we get to the final part of this statement that I'm making is, how can we even assume to build out smart AGI, artificial general intelligence, or artificial superintelligence to be compatible with humanity if we don't set an example in the first place? So we all need to sit up straight and get our acts together and be better people. What I've learned from this conference, the Beneficial AGI Conference, is a lot. I've seen many friends and many ideas. Nothing has really shaken me to my core except what I see as missing. And I'm the type of person that looks for where the gaps are. And then I think, how can we bridge that gap? Or if there's a problem, how can we work towards solving that problem? One of the biggest problems I see today, and I think it's not only at the summit, but at many different conferences on AI in the future, is the leaning towards we need ethics and ethics. And frankly, it's a little bit over the top. First off, ethics stems from philosophy, and there's not enough philosophers. Number two, to be an ethicist, you really know how to argue well, to look at all sides of the issue and not come in with your agenda or your own ideology that you're pushing and to polarize or position others. And I see too much of that within the ethics lore. One of the benefits of this conference, and the takeaway for me in any case, is that there is a greater need for looking at going back to the visionary ideas. Let's not be too held back or in a straitjacket of it has to be ethics, there can't be any mistakes. There are going to be mistakes, and we need to face that. But if we do strive to be better in our own actions, get off social media and really go out and smell the roses, so to speak, then I think that we can accept the frailty of others and the frailty within ourselves and understand there will be frailties in AGI.